Hey there. My name is Christopher Kurdek, and I did a video a couple weeks ago about how to get your seed started inside your seed tent or whatever operation you had going on inside. We made it to the end of May here, and it's a beautiful sunny day. And we're starting to put some plants in the ground. So I'm going to give you guys some tips and tricks how to get your garden going if you got some transplants, as well as we're going to plant some seeds from square one. So if you don't have any transplants yet, I'll give you some tips to start with just dirt and seeds as well. Thanks for joining, and I can't wait to share what I've worked with me in the past, and hopefully will help you out in the future. Alright, so as you can see here, I have a couple different types of soil, as well as a kind of different types of pots here. These kind of old 5-gallon buckets were kind of the way to do it back in the day, but nowadays we have some really nice of these felt buckets I really like. They're reusable every year. They're a little less than $5 each, but they're really hardy. They hold up, and they actually offer a little bit more space than maybe the 5-gallon buckets. They're not going to crack like the buckets do also, so they have a longer longevity to them. Also, we have a couple different types of soil here. So I just went to my local farm and garden place, and I got a mix. So I got a topsoil compost mix here. As you can see, it's pretty rich and dark, but it also sometimes with the compost, if you could see, you'll get little pieces of clumps of compost like this sometimes with the compost that you kind of need to break up because it's a little bit stuck together. So you want to make sure you're planting your plants, especially if you're potting plants, it's a nice loose soil. It's not too dense for your plants. And again, you're going to go through here. As you can see here, there's a piece of that kind of compost. You're going to break that up and crumble it up. You're going to want it as loose as possible so it's easy for those roots to kind of get a hold of and do their thing, so you get a really nice plant. As you can see here, there's a couple rocks in my soil as well, so I'm going to chuck those and put those in the woods. But looks like this is pretty good to go here. So I've got this tomato plant here, and as you can see here, it's gotten a little rough at the ends here. It got a little put outside a little bit too soon. But you know what I would suggest with tomato plants actually are one of the few plants that will actually root no matter how deep you put them. So I'll probably, since I'm not going to expect any fruit or growth this far down on the plant, I'll probably put this plant pretty deep in there in the bottom, right in there. And also, if you ever grown tomatoes before, they often have these little suckers in between there. So you want to keep picking those out because they kind of suck the life out of your tomato plants, almost like a weed does your garden. So try to make sure they're ready to go. Best time to plant it would be later in the day, maybe when they didn't get direct sunlight, but these plants are hardened off pretty well, so I'm not too worried about them. Alright, so I've been talking about some dirt we've been using here. Again, I have got a topsoil compost mix for my tomatoes here. Maybe if you have a smaller operation, I would suggest maybe using some really nice dirt. It's kind of expensive, like this Fox Farm dirt right here. Again, it is expensive, so that's a little bit out of my price range for the amount of plants I have. If you only got a couple on your porch or your front porch, I definitely go big and use the better soil. You're definitely get a better product at the end. And again, pretty straightforward. I'm using one of these felt buckets here, and just pour it right in there, and you're good to go. And again, this soil is very loose. It's a lot. I'm going to show you right now that it is a lot looser and darker and richer than kind of the topsoil and compost. And again, this is a premium soil right here. It is a little pricey, but if you're only going to do a couple plants on your porch, or if you've got a smaller kind of growing setup, I definitely suggest getting a better quality soil. And it always can help you at your local farm and garden center if you are talking about particular types of soil there. But I've got the topsoil and the compost mix right here. And I'm going to get these tomatoes in there. I'm going to put one tomato in each pot. I'm going to show you again, I used a couple different types of pots. So I have these compostable pots right here, as well as your generic plastic pots. I'm going to use the generic plastic pot. When I pot this next tomato though, I'm going to show us some more tips and tricks that kind of help us get a good root base going for our tomatoes here. They're pretty straightforward. We're going to take it out. Sometimes they might need a little knock at the bottom. Make sure you're just being gentle with your plant. This one's got a pretty solid root base there. Always like to be gentle with the root base, but sometimes I like to just break it up a little bit to kind of get them going there. And again, this tomato, I was hit a little bit hard when I was hardening it off, so I'm going to plant it fairly deep, because again, tomatoes will grow roots out of their trunks or their stems there. And again, I'm gonna get this pretty deep in there. I'm just gonna fill in my soil right on top here. I could have gone a little bit deeper, but again, you know, usually the tomatoes are got an extra spot right here as well. Some soil, and just keep on filling up there. As you can see, I'm actually filling up my pots on my garden, not on the grass, so I'm not wasting soil if the soil gets on the ground. It's already in the garden, so I don't really have to move it around or worry about cleaning up the grass. So it saves me a little work in the long run. And hey, I'm gonna fill this all the way up to the top because these roots will actually, by the end of the summertime, they will fill up this whole bucket. So you wanna make it nice and high for this guy and keep it going there. Some more scoops. Again, you can always use a bigger shovel if you may need. And that looks pretty good there. And again, as you can see here, there's a couple of rocks, but if there's a sticker or some little rocks in there, I'm kind of throwing them out. They definitely don't help the growing process with the vegetables there. And again, this guy looks a little unhappy in the bottom, but this guy will blow up no problem. And again, I want to make sure the soil is full. It's nice and deep there. I kind of broke apart those roots a little bit to get them going. And then you want to pack it down. You don't want to pack it down too much. Make sure it's got, you know, it's not tipping over, it's straight. Always a label is very helpful with your plants. I'm gonna stick that label right in there. If you do take one thing away that you learned from this video, make sure to always water your plants as soon as you put them in the pot. That helps them grab their root base and gain their root base together. So I got my tomato potted in the pot here. And again, as soon as you plant anything in new soil or transplant anything, make sure to give it a good soaking of water. And again, as you can see, my stream is not too high because it could possibly hurt the roots. And you kind of want to just give it a good soaking. Once the water starts pulling up on top, usually a good sign you're good. So you don't want to wet it too much. This soil is a little dense because it is a compost mix. So if you buy a premium soil, it will soak in a little bit better than you. I make sure the soil is kind of even here. That looks pretty good. And again, you could hit it a little bit later more if you want. This is a pretty happy tomato, so I think it wouldn't take too much to get this guy rooted in its new home. So we also, again, we used our premium soil for this guy. And before I talked about having a couple different pots there, I kind of have the plastic pot here, as well as the compostable pot here. And this one you can put right into whatever you're potting in, whether it be the ground or whether it be your potting plants. And as you can see here, this guy is ready to go. His roots are exposed on the top. This is definitely a little bit too small of a pot for such big of a plant. So what I like to do, again, they are compostable, but I try to gently pull off as much of this at the end as possible. As you can see, this guy's coming out pretty easily. And again, you can just put them right in the ground, but this is a lot more helpful in kind of moving the process along so they don't have to be bounded by kind of this pots and the roots. You don't want to pull the roots on too much, but again, as you can see, this was very root bound, this plant. This plant was definitely ready to go in the ground, and I'm gently pulling this away. There might be some pieces here in the bottom that are left. Again, they are compostable pots, but again, that'll just help move the process along. And again, just break up a little bit on the bottom, very gently, not too rough there, of the root base, so maybe it'll give a little bit of a head start to get going and get a good root base in there. I'm going to put this in our next pot right over here, and as you can see here, it's a little high, so I'm going to have to take some dirt out of this guy here. And again, I do have some of those other pots here, but I like using the tomatoes in these bigger pots, in these felt bags. As you can see here, there's a couple rocks in here, so definitely not going to helpful with our tomato plants. So we're going to chuck those in the woods, because that's, again, just kind of taking up space in our pots there. And again, I went for a compost topsoil mix. There are plenty of options when it comes to soil. You can spend a lot of money on soil as well. So again, it depends on kind of how many plants you want to grow and kind of where you can get your soil. This was from a local company. I got actually a couple places, different places I grabbed soil from this year. But again, this guy does not have to go as deep as that other guy, as you can see here. He's got some pretty good root base there, and he didn't get hit as hard when I was hardening that plant off a few weeks ago when I was bringing the tent. So speaking about hardening off, I didn't just take these plants and kind of move them right outside. It's kind of a slow process. It takes about a week or so. First, you want to make sure they're not in direct sunlight when you bring them out inside to outside. So, you know, gradually give them more sunlight throughout the week. So not direct sunlight. Obviously, you want to make sure there isn't any heavy downpours or they're getting too wet. And again, you want to make sure that they are pretty happy outside, but an hour or two at a time the first day if you're hardening your plants off, then a few more hours after that. And then after maybe about a week, if you don't expect the frost, leave them out overnight, and then they should be ready to go in their new homes. But again, you don't want to take your plants from inside, even if they're by a window, and just drop them right outside, because you do have to go through a little bit more of the hardening process to kind of strengthen them up to wind, direct sunlight, as well as other elements. But again, I'm going to pop this tomato right in here. I got a little bit, you can see I got to dig pretty deep here. And again, it is okay if we get the soil right up to the leaves here. And I like to keep maybe a spare bucket on hand. Hey, it's a little helpful kind of just to get the soil back in there. Make sure you're doing it kind of gently though, because you don't want to rough this guy up too much. And as you can see here, I try to keep it level and in the middle of the pot, maybe just a little bit more soil here. And again, if you get these big compost chunks or rocks, like a rock here I'm going to get rid of that. But I got this compost chunk here. I'm going to break it up. Again, any looser soil, the better. If you do buy a premium mix from the store, they're going to be very loose and well aerated. And this was more of a topsoil compost mix. So it's definitely a little heavier and denser, but it's also a little more forgiving on the wallet as having to buy premium bags of compost and dirt. So this guy is in his plant, is in his home, ready to go. And again, never forget about watering. If you look at our other plant, again, this was a little bit of a heavy soil here, so I maybe over-watered a little bit, but it's a very hot day today, so that is the end of May, so I'm not too worried about kind of giving them too much water. And again, same deal here, nice easy stream, nothing too heavy for this guy. And just make sure the water's soaked every time you're planting a new plant into its home. I'm going to throw a little bit more soil in here. Make sure to give it plenty of water. Again, you want to be gentle to it. Usually it doesn't take too long for this guy to get rooted in. And most of my experience is that if a plant's not going to take, you'll usually notice it in the first, few hours or days. They'll kind of be wilty and not too happy. So again, this guy, I got pretty good faith that he's going to take no problem to the soil. Pretty big plant too. Usually the bigger the plant, the better chances for it to kind of take off and thrive. So I got some tomato plants in here. The next I'm going to show us is going to pop in a couple jalapeno plants, and then I'm going to show us how to direct sow some corn. All right, so I have some jalapeno peppers here, and I'm going to actually use the plastic kind of containers here. You can see they're a lot smaller than the ones for the tomatoes. I think this will be fine. You could put peppers or tomatoes in the ground as well. I like to pot maybe some of those warm weather plants for multiple reasons. The first reason is you're able to fertilize them. So obviously you can fertilize your garden as well. Fertilizer can be a little bit of an expensive product, so therefore if they're in kind of containers and contained, therefore you don't have to waste as much as your product. Here in Vermont, we can sometimes, especially in the Northeast Kingdom, get a late frost in the season or an early frost at the end of the season. So, that helps me stretch my season as well. If I do expect the frost, pick up my plant and bring it on into the garage. If this guy's a little bit bigger and in the ground, it's going to be pretty tough to kind of take it out of the ground to keep it safe. So then you got to break out the blankets and kind of cover that if you're trying to stave off the frost. So that's particularly why I like to use more pots for my other plants. For my in soil, I'm going to plant some corn here. I like lettuces and green beans, root vegetables, pumpkins, anything like that are a lot better. But again, more of those warmer herbs, sometimes basil I'll put in pots, but more of those warmer climate vegetables I like putting in pots, again, because it helps on the fertilizer. So, if we fertilize, it'll kind of help you move the season along, as well as you can extend the season, which is fairly short here in northern Vermont, when it comes to frost mitigation. So this is another one of those compostable pots. This guy isn't as well rooted as the tomato. So as you can see here, it's coming out really easy. And again, you can plant them right in there. I like to kind of take them out just to give them kind of a boost. All right, so I got a little hole in my bucket here. I'll plop this guy right down here. Make sure there's no rocks or, sticks or anything in there. And just take some soil, fresh soil, right around there. And again, this guy is a little smaller than those tomato plants, so I'm definitely gonna be a lot gentler. This definitely is not as strong and compact as of a root base. I keep on piling here. This is pretty good. And again, I used a smaller pot for this guy, the plastic one in that, because I had this kind of laying around, as well as, they're not as big as the tomatoes. If we look at our tomato over here though, you can see the soil soaked up most of the water. This is about kind of how you want the soil when you first kind of plant it. You want it to be pretty damp. And again, it'll dry out pretty quick today. We have very low relative humidity and lots of sunshine. And I'm gonna plant, just make sure I water this guy. Again, one of the most important parts is to make sure you water. And again, if you notice, I was getting the soil and not the leaves. It is the middle of the day now, so, I don't want to get water on those leaves. There's a potential those leaves could fry from the sunlight and the water. So again, I try to just be gentle, not too much of a flow on the hose. That's about good. Again, this soil is a little dense, but it should be fun, drain through. Trying to get the leaves, especially if it is as sunny as this. And again, later in the day or earlier in the day, best time to plant pots. Sometimes they can struggle with the heat in the middle of the day and the direct sunlight. I have pretty sure that these guys are hardened off pretty well, so I'm not too worried about them having any potential dangers for being planted this time of day. I've got another jalapeno plant in here. And again, always make sure you label your plants. I'm pretty familiar what plants look like. I'll label my jalapeno plant here. I got another little jalapeno plant here. Might need a little bit more dirt. Again, it's a lot smaller root base than we saw on those tomato plants. Definitely don't have to do as deep. I definitely want to be a little bit more gentle with these plants, again, because they are smaller. But this guy should take off pretty quick, especially with all the sun we've had. And again, you want to keep up on watering though when it is very sunny and dry like this. It has been, which I think many of us will take this time of year. It is the end of May, so kind of never know what you can get this time of year when it comes to weather, whether it be snow, frost. Usually I wait till Memorial Day weekend. It is just before Memorial Day weekend for our climate. So this is right about when we're pretty much frost free. And again, if you still have the threat of frost, it's in a pot, pick it up, bring it inside overnight, and bring it on out the next day to soak up the sun. Definitely don't want to forget the last part, one of the most important parts, is make sure we get a little water on this guy right here. Again, you don't want to overwater. I'm going to be a little bit more gentle with this. That's good. Make sure it's pretty firm in there. Give it a nice kind of pat down at the root base there. You always can go back and water. Try not to overwater though. All right, so now we're going to direct sow some corn. If you're ever planting plants inside or outside, always read the back of the packet. There's tons of information there. It tells you about what to expect, when to harvest, some planting tips as well. This suggests to sow after all danger of frost has passed and soil has warmed. One of also the most important parts tells you the depths of the seed. This says 1 to 2 inches, spacing of the seeds, 4 seeds per foot, and days to germination, 7 to 10 days. And it suggests placing spacing after thinning, which is about 10 to 12 inches apart, and rows about 1.5 feet apart. So corn can be a little finicky, but it is a grass, so it's gonna kind of look like kind of grass coming up from the ground when you first seed it. Personally, these seed packets are organic, so they're a little bit pricier, but again, they're pretty cheap comparatively for how much corn you can get out of one packet. So especially with my climate, you kind of have a very short window to grow corn. So I always overseed. My philosophy is you could put a few extra seeds in the ground if some take or all of them take. You always can thin out the little seedlings when they come, but something like a warm weather crop that doesn't do as well in our climate, go a little bit heavy on the seeding is my suggestion. You might waste a couple cents in seeds, but again, you're guaranteed to have enough corn to get you through. And then if it's too dense, you kind of can seed kind of thin them out. And first of the tactics I use is got my handy spaded garden shovel here. And I got them about a little less than a half a foot. Sometimes I go a little less on the spacing to try to get some more area. But I kind of just put the end like this just to loosen up the soil. Again, this soil is a little heavier than I'd like, but this is what I'm working with this year in my garden. And again, you kind of can see I've loosened it up. Then I like to take my palm or my hand and kind of hold it sideways and dig it in the soil here. And it kind of, you can see I've loosened up the soil. I'll take my fingers to loosen it up a little bit more. But I got about 1 inch to a ½ foot trench. And again, there's big clumps of compost like this, just like I did in the pots. We're trying to make it as loose and inviting as possible to seed this corn. So I'm gonna open up my packet. Always like to keep it in my pocket so I'm not stepping on it, or maybe I'm getting water on it when I'm watering other plants. What I usually like to do is kind of get a handful here. You can see they're just dried corn kernels, so you can also maybe try to do your own corn seeds yourself at home. And again, I'm gonna probably do, it suggested maybe 4 foot. I'll probably go 6 or 7 a foot. Again, so these are bigger seeds. When you're seeding something like lettuce or turnips, it's pretty tough to count seeds because they are very small. I'm just gonna pop these seeds in there, you know, every inch or ½ inch or so, probably about every inch, about that. And again, I'm one to kind of overseed. Again, there's some clumps here I can kind of get rid of, but I like to kind of overseed, and again, to give me a chance, then I can thin out my seeds afterwards. And again, just kind of cover it gently with the dirt like this. Usually I'll try to do all my rows before I cover, but this works as well. And you can see here, again, I'm trying to make the dirt nice and loose. I'm not pumping down on it or patting it down really hard, just really nice and loose, but you still want to make sure the corn's in there. And again, right on top. And as always, no matter if it's in a pot or if it's in the ground, I'm gonna grab my hose, give these guys a little water there. And again, not too hard, just a nice little soaking there. You can see some of it's running off, that's okay, but you don't want to go too heavy or hard with your watering. This could blow the seeds out of the soil, which would not be very helpful. And that's about it. So I do have some seeds in the ground now, so it's going to be my responsibility until they pop up to give it a decent amount of water. As you can see over here, I've seeded already. We've got some lettuces and fennel up here, some radishes over there. But I've already seeded kind of every area you cannot see that doesn't have lettuce or some greens growing in it. And as you can see, the area is damp. So if you do seed something, you need to make sure it's damp all the time until you get those, you know, little seedlings to pop up. Because again, for the germinating process, you need a really moist, warm area to help these move these seeds along. So again, make sure it's nice and damp, and it's continually damp until you start getting some of those sprouts to sprout up, and they should be pretty damp after that. But again, you don't want to soak it too much, but it should be consistently wet or damp through the whole germinating process. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming on out here. I've got a few more rows of corn to seed, and as you can see, I've got a lot of empty buckets here, so I've got plenty of work to do. I'm hastily trying to move this season along as it is a little shorter. Hopefully I'll be able to make some more videos in the future, and everybody stays healthy.